The primary reason for my YouTube channel is to educate people about trees. Sure, I like to show exciting jobs, and sure, there are a lot of fun, interesting things on there, but really showing you why a tree is healthy or not healthy, but also probably more important is how to recognize what causes trees to decline or fail. I want to show you what's right and what's wrong. I want to show you how to recognize when a tree is in trouble, and just as well, what may have been the cause of the problem. I would have to say a full 80%, maybe 90% of the time, it's people pressure, construction damage, and very often improper pruning. How often have you seen a tree that was topped? And people say, wow, it came back. It's like a haircut, it sprouts back. Well, it's the long-term impact that I'm talking about. When a tree gets butchered and the tree suckers out and it sprouts out, in lots of cases, most cases, that's setting off the demise of the tree for the rest of its life. So the mistakes that are made early on really are what caused the tree to fail in the future. So understanding and recognizing some of these mistakes is one of my primary goals here. Now, at this time of year, most of the trees that, unless they're conifers or broadleaf evergreens, most of the trees are bare. And I want to show you some trees that are, we'll call them naked, and you can clearly see what's going on. I'm going to show you how to recognize it. And I hope after you watch this video, you're going to drive around and you're going to see trees a little bit differently. You're going to look at these bare trees and say, oh, that one was topped. Well, look at the way they trimmed that one. You can see all this stuff. But when they fill out and they're full of foliage, a lot of times people think, wow, that's a beautiful tree. So follow along with me. I'm going to show you a lot of examples here, and we're going to talk about it. This tree is a valley oak, Quercus lobata. It's intended to be a big, wide-spreading tree, but for some reason, I have no idea, the homeowner thought that this tree was too tall. So if you look closely, everywhere that this tree was chopped back is just a mass of sprouts, water sprouts. It is just going to be this big bush of a tree. Now, the irony of it is when it fills out and it's green, it looks really good. People see it as a beautiful shaped tree. He also did his walnut tree that way. That really bugged me when I saw that. It's like, for God's sakes, why did you do that? Now to contrast it, let's see what a real valley oak could be. They're magnificent specimens. This tree has never been topped. It's had very little pruning done on its life, just dead branches and a few crossovers, and very, very light amount of pruning all the way down. And it's a magnificent specimen. This tree is well over 100 years old. That past one, its life has been shortened. Now here's a row of liquid amber trees that somebody decided was too tall. And here is yet another tree that somebody cut back really hard. I'm trying to remember what kind of tree that is. I think that is also a liquid amber. And it was cut back severely hard all the way around. And you can see how the tree has sprouted out and thrown out these massive amounts of foliage. Now each of these pockets of foliage is growing off of an area of decay. So as these stubbed off cuts sprout out, the decay starts in and it hollows out. Do you see where I'm pointing there? That is going to become a weakness. And if you go up a little bit higher, you can see where it was cut off once again, and that doubled and tripled. So everywhere that the branches just, this is not a normal structure. This is not the way the tree would have grown naturally. So while there was a temporary thought that it was safer because it was shorter, the long-term effects are horrible. Actually, this is an ash tree. This is an evergreen ash tree. Look at that mess. in order to prune this, I was asked to prune this tree, and we did get the job. I'm going to have to take out the biggest of those and 2 or 3 of the other small ones, and then lighten the load of whatever is left, just to keep these branches from self-destructing. So I'm going to have to go through the entire tree that way. And instead of allowing the natural framework to be the basis for this tree, we're adjusting it. Now here's another mess. Look at this thing. I can't believe that somebody did this. This is a deodar cedar. I can't help myself. I see something like this, I pull over. I don't even know who lives here. I'm not going to show you the house. But there's a Chinese elm tree, and somebody trimmed it like they think it's a fruit tree. Or I don't know why they did this, but you can see that it's been topped in the past and then retopped and reshaped. And the irony of it is that the tree will survive. It'll sprout out, it'll sucker out, and in 3 or 4 months' time, it's going to look beautiful. And they're going to say, well, that's the right way to do it. That's the right thing to do to this tree. But it's not. It's not. All those wounds are going to end up being areas of long-term decay and weaknesses. And wherever you make cuts like that, it's going to sprout out with multiples of branches that are growing off of weak spots. A natural structure on a tree is so important. I can look at this birch tree right here too. You can see right in through there. Somebody topped it off at one time, and all the new sprouts are coming back. And it looks like the tree is thriving and doing really well. But as I've said before, birch trees decay quickly and they rot out quickly, and you make lots of big wounds, and before long the tree is hollow, supporting all this upper canopy, and then the tree dies. Let's look at some of the other birch trees on this property here. This is part of the reason I stopped. Let me get out of the sun here. Somebody came along with a chainsaw and made massive flush cuts. They cut them as close to the bark as they possibly could. And here's another irony. A lot of people will say, well, look at that closely. You can see that the cambium is growing around it, and it's healing. It's growing around it. It's going to be better. But all of these cuts have been, you can look at the tree and say, well, it's still going to fill out. It's still looking good up in the top. But in just a few short years, the damage that has occurred from these wounds will kill this tree. So, whoever did this, if they hired somebody to do it, boy, they certainly got ripped off. This is a horrible thing to do. I just, whenever I see this, I cringe. And there's tree companies all over the place that will do this kind of work. Look at the other one over here. See if I can focus that a little better. Somebody came along with a chainsaw and cut it as close as they possibly could, all the way up. And these birch trees, they're going to die. Now, to contrast this, I want to show a tree that I ran across that I find as a very rare example of a tree that has not been destroyed. Now, this is a liquid amber, liquid amber styraciflua, and it is a species of tree that usually is a tall single trunk. And then the branches will come off of this tall single trunk. It's a single leader tree, and it does have some issues that people don't like. It develops these little liquid amber balls. But what I'm talking about on this particular tree is there's a few pruning cuts, really light pruning cuts on it, but for the most part, this tree has evolved naturally, and it doesn't need a thing. I mean, there might be a few bits of deadwood up there. I see one little branch that broke off over it, but that's it. Just leave it alone. If the trees are developing normally and there aren't any problems, leave it alone. I can see down low, I can see a few cuts that were taken off. Well, sure, okay, they were hanging down in your face, or they were hitting the building. But for the most part, this tree is exceptional. I can say the same thing about this one right next to it. Look all the way up. You don't see any areas where the tree has been cut off. It's got a beautiful structure. I see a few cuts way out there. Looks like they got somebody in here with a bucket truck that did a few trimming cuts. Those probably weren't necessary. Now, a lot of guys will sell tree jobs based on fear. They'll say the tree is too tall, the tree is dangerous, this is a type of tree that breaks. And what really happens when somebody comes along and over prunes a tree like this is they create a problem. They create the excessive amount of end weight that causes breakages, or they create a tree that creates too many of these damn liquid amber balls, or whatever fruit or whatever the tree generates. So in many cases, the tree guys or the people that you hire to take care of your trees are making things so much worse for you in the long run. And right around the corner from that beautiful liquid amber is an example of 2 liquid amber trees that somebody just went chop, 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 and the resulting new growth has come out. And to the untrained eye, you might say this is a beautiful tree. But if you look really close and really focus at all the unions where all this new growth is coming, these are long-term pockets of decay and weakness. And the resulting new growth comes out heavier than it should be, and the weaknesses will lead to future problems. So somebody came along and said, your trees are too tall, your trees are dangerous, your trees are this or that. Or the homeowner called somebody up and said, I'm afraid my trees are too tall. And the guy that did the work says, sure, I'll cut it in half for you. Took their paycheck, went home with absolutely no regard for the longevity or the situation of what will happen. Now the resulting problem here has created a higher maintenance tree. This tree is not dying, but what's happening is the decay pockets are slowly getting worse. So had these trees been left alone, you could have just let them be, let them grow. But now you can see what the difference is. You can see that the resulting new growth from all these top cuts are these long straight shoots, and as they get bigger and bigger and bigger, what are you going to do? The next time you trim this tree, are you going to, I'll cut it off up here, and then the new growth, you'll get the same thing. You'll get these multiples of sprouts out. So I think the moral of the story that I'm having to say right now is, ask yourself why you're trimming your tree. What is the purpose of what you're doing? Because oftentimes it's fear. And fear is the wrong reason to prune a tree, unless it really truly is dangerous. Now here's a small tree that gets topped repeatedly every single year. This is a crepe myrtle, and while I don't approve of topping trees, there are situations where people have a desire or an effect that they're trying to create or produce. And this tree right now is going to send out lots of sprouts from every one of these cuts, and every one of the sprouts is going to grow 4 to 6 feet in 1 year. But what it will do is it'll create multiples of long-lasting flowers. So if that's the effect that the homeowner is trying to achieve, and they don't mind paying the gardener every single year, then what they're doing really has nothing to do with what's right for the tree. It's what's right for the homeowner. You know, they've kind of butchered all these things, and I hate to say butcher because, you know, they look like so many parking lot trees that I see everywhere that they keep down because of the need for signage or the need to keep the lighting working in a parking lot. So there's reasons for reducing trees that have everything to do with what the client or the owner of the tree wants or needs, but it's certainly not right for the tree. Now here's an example of 2 trees that were very harshly pruned. And I have to say, why did they do that? Now they probably have a gardener that says, I can trim that tree. And they went up there and they just whacked the hell out of it. And they said, oh yeah, it'll recover. It's like a haircut, it'll come back. So we've got this flowering pear tree down here. Will it sprout out and sucker out? Yeah, it'll sucker out and sprout out, but the damage that has been done has permanently altered the future of how this tree is going to grow. Now this is a sycamore, Platanus acerfolia, London plane, And this is a type of tree that normally can get huge. Maybe they wanted to keep it contained. Maybe they didn't like a big tree. Maybe they don't like it at all. But what they did is going to create a higher maintenance tree in the long run, because all of these ends are now going to be these multiples of sprouts that come all over the place. And this tree won't die as a result of this, because it's a pretty hardy tree. It'll tolerate it. But it certainly won't evolve into the magnificent low maintenance specimen that it could have been. Now here's another example of improper pruning. They were afraid of this tree, so somebody came in here and cleaned out everything down low. They just kept stripping it up. This is what's often referred to as lion's tailing, where you strip off everything and make lots and lots and lots of chainsaw wounds all the way up and leave a little tuft of foliage out on the ends. And right now it doesn't look too bad. When it leaves out, it'll actually appear to be really good. But you have to think about the long-term impact of all of these wounds, and how the weight of the tree is going to continue to develop on the ends. It'll get heavier than it should because you've taken out the balance. You know, a limb has a balance of small branches that come off of it in all areas, and it needs that balance. If you take everything off except for what's on the very tip, it'll continue to develop, but it'll get heavier than it should get, and oftentimes these trees self-destruct. Another big part of the problem is all these wounds rot out. So this pruning has shortened the life of the tree. And you can't see it in this video, but I can see it from clear. There's problems everywhere. I see big wounds, I see decay pockets, I see drying out, I see sun scald, I see all the problems that are going to lead to the shortening of the life of this tree. Now here's a tree that I have history with. This is a Siberian elm tree. And the people that used to live in this house were friends of mine, and I pruned this tree many, many, many times. But when I pruned it, the tree was way up there and it had a natural framework. Unfortunately, the people moved away and the new owners came in, and I drove by one day and this tree was chopped down to here. People call that pollarding. People say that's good for the tree. People say that's a good way of maintaining the tree. Well, it's clear to see what's going on here now. The resulting new growth are these long, long, long shoots that are all being supported by these low decay pockets. And as they get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, something gives. So sometimes people come along and they'll cut it all just a little bit above all that and start over. And then you've got a whole new mass coming out. So the point of my story is you've got a tree that wants to be huge. Trying to maintain a big tree as a small tree leads to all kinds of problems. And I won't go over it again. You've heard it many, many times. But this is a really good example. Now at this time of year when trees are dormant and the deciduous trees have dropped all their leaves, you can see these naked silhouettes, and it's really clear to see what's happened. You can see the history of what's going on. I was kind of irritated when I saw this because I spent so many years, probably 15 years, of doing light pruning and deadwooding, and there was a little bit of weight reduction, but this tree had a stature to it that was just, oh, it was magnificent. It was so beautiful. You know, I have no idea who the new owners are, or their reasoning, or their justification. They may have taken the word of a company saying, oh, this is an elm tree, we pollard elm trees. Well, you can't make a rule based upon what you've seen and what happens. Now the tree looks good, and when it fills out, it's going to be a beautiful looking tree with all these hidden ticking time bombs.